I had his keys, his car, and a 3-hour head start. I made it 40 miles before his hand closed around my wrist at a red light, and the bond between us snapped so tight I couldn't breathe. Let me back up. 3 weeks before that moment, I was nobody. Maya Reeves, 27, graphic designer, living in a studio apartment in Denver with a coffee maker that sputtered and a lease up for renewal. My biggest problem was whether to splurge on the good cereal. My life was small and predictable and mine. Then my grandmother died and left me a cabin in Crestfall, Colorado. Crestfall isn't on most maps. It's a mountain town tucked into a valley between two ridges, accessible by one winding road, population 1,200. The realtor who handled Grandma Ruth's estate told me it was charming. She said it the way people say charming when they mean strange. I noticed she didn't offer to drive me up herself. I arrived on a Tuesday in early October with a U-Haul trailer and a box of my grandmother's letters I'd never read. The air hit me first. Something about it made my chest expand differently, like I'd been breathing through a straw my whole life and only just noticed. The trees were turning. The mountains were enormous and close. I felt, inexplicably, like I'd been here before. The cabin was at the edge of town, backing up against the tree line. It smelled like pine resin and old wool, and something I couldn't name, something warm and animal. I spent the first night telling myself I wasn't afraid of the sounds coming from the forest. I met Caius Blackthorn the next morning. I was at the only coffee shop in town, a place called The Bend, ordering an Americano when the air pressure in the room changed. That's the only way I can describe it. Like a weather shift. Like the moment before a thunderstorm when everything goes quiet and the birds stop. I turned, and he was in the doorway. He was tall, 6'4", maybe more. Dark hair and light gray eyes that looked like they belonged to something older than a man. He wore a black Henley and work boots. He had the kind of face that didn't invite small talk. The whole shop had gone slightly still. He looked straight at me. Not around me, not in my general direction. At me specifically, like I was the only person in a room of 100. His nostrils flared. It was subtle. If I hadn't been staring back, I would have missed it. Then something happened that I still don't have good words for. It was like a string I didn't know existed went taut inside my sternum. A pull. Deep and specific and completely outside my control. My body swayed toward him by half an inch before I caught myself. He crossed the room in 8 steps. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. Up close, his eyes were more silver than gray, and he was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Somewhere between certainty and something that looked almost like pain. Ruth's granddaughter, he said. His voice was low and even. I said, Maya Reeves. It's Blackthorn. He didn't extend his hand. I knew your grandmother. Everyone seems to have known her, I said. I barely did. Something moved across his face at that. He held my gaze for 3 beats too long, then stepped back exactly far enough to be polite. Welcome to Crestfall, he said. Be careful at the tree line after dark. He ordered his coffee, black, no hesitation, and left. I stood there with my Americano going cold and my heart doing something completely irrational. Over the next 5 days, I saw him everywhere. Not in a stalking way. Crestfall was small, but he was always at the periphery. Across the street when I was at the hardware store, at the far end of the grocery aisle, he never approached me again. He would see me, hold my gaze for a moment, and look away, like he was checking on something. The pull didn't go away, it got worse. I started noticing other things about Crestfall. The way the town organized itself around a property on the North Ridge, a big timber frame compound I could see from my cabin porch. The way certain people moved through the community with an ease and a group awareness that reminded me of a flock of birds turning in unison. The way everyone knew Caius, deferred to him without being obvious about it. The way he moved through spaces like he owned them without needing to say so. On day 6, I ran into a woman named Delia at the Bend. She was maybe 40 sharp eyes and a kind mouth, and she sat herself down across from me without being invited. "You're staying," she said. "Not a question." "Figuring it out," I said. "Ruth wanted you to stay." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "She talked about you, about getting you up here eventually." "She never invited me," I said, and that was true. My grandmother had kept her Crestfall life completely separate from ours. Cards at Christmas, a phone call on birthdays. "She was protecting you," Delia said carefully. "She was waiting for the right time." "Protecting me from what?" Delia looked at me for a long moment. "You should ask Caius that." I didn't ask Caius that. Instead, I went home and started reading the letters. There were 47 of them, spanning 30 years, in my grandmother's handwriting, small and slanted and perfectly consistent right up until the last one, dated 3 months before she died. Most of them were addressed to someone named Ethan. Unsigned. Never sent. They were love letters. But they were also something else. Because in them, Grandma Ruth described things that weren't possible. She wrote about a night when she shifted for the last time and left her pack behind. She wrote about choosing the human world and the half-life that came with it. The way her senses dulled without a pack bond. The way the moon felt different when she was alone. She wrote about Ethan, who was human, who she chose over everything else she was. She wrote about a daughter she gave to the pack for safekeeping because the alternative was not safe, because the alternative was something called a blood price, a debt her pack carried that put her children at risk. And she wrote, in the last letter dated 3 months ago, "Maya will find her way to Crestfall soon. I've arranged it. The bond will find her first. I hope she doesn't run. Running costs too much." I read that letter 4 times. Then I drove to the compound on the North Ridge. I don't know what I was thinking. I was angry. I was also scared, in the specific way you're scared when the ground you thought you were standing on turns out to be a tarp over a hole. I knocked on the front door of the main building, which was massive and made of dark timber, and looked like it had been there longer than the town. Caius opened the door. He was in a gray t-shirt, his hair slightly damp, like he'd just showered. He looked at me, then at the letters I was holding, and recognition moved across his face. "I need answers," I said. "My grandmother's letters say she was a shifter. They say she had a daughter she gave to her pack. They mention a blood price. I want to know what any of that has to do with me." I stepped back from the door. "Come in." Inside was warm and smelled like wood smoke and cedar. He led me to a big kitchen and put water on without asking, which for some reason made me more comfortable, not less. "Your grandmother was one of ours," he said. He stayed on the other side of the kitchen island, like he was being careful. "Not this pack, originally. She was born into the Ashwood pack, further east. She chose a human mate and left. The pack let her go because she agreed to an arrangement." "The blood price," I said. "Her first daughter would be returned to the pack when it was safe to do so." The water was too loud. I focused on it. "My mother." "Your mother died before she could be brought home," he said. He said it without softening it, which I appreciated. "She and your father. Car accident when you were 2. I knew this part. I'd been raised by an aunt in Denver. Grandma Ruth had been a distant figure. "So the arrangement passed to me," I said. "It wasn't that simple. He was watching me the way he'd watched me in the coffee shop. Careful, measuring. By the time your mother died, the Ashwood pack was gone. The blood price died with them. You were under no obligation. Then why did my grandmother leave me this cabin?" He was quiet for 1 beat. 2, because of the other thing. The pull in my chest tightened. "What other thing?" I said. "Sit down, Maya. Tell me while I'm standing." He let out a breath that was close to a sigh. "You're my fated mate." The words landed quietly, like a stone dropped in deep water. "That's not a real thing," I said. "You felt it," he said, "in the coffee shop. You've felt it every time we've been in the same space this week. You felt it when you walked in this door. I had felt it. I was feeling it now. The pull that lived in my sternum, oriented toward him like a compass finding north. That's just chemistry, I said, or proximity, or something wrong with my nervous system. It's a pack bond, he said, a mating bond specifically. It forms between fated mates before they've accepted it. It gets stronger the longer you're near each other. Not a shifter, I said. You're half, he said. Your mother was one of ours. It's enough. I stood there in his kitchen with 47 letters in my hands and the most profound sense of my life rearranging itself around me without my permission. What does accepting the bond mean? I said. Something shifted in his eyes. It means you stay, join the pack, become my mate. And if I don't accept it? It fades eventually, he said, over months. It's not comfortable, but it fades. He said it evenly, but his jaw was tight. Give me time to think, I said. Of course. I left. He didn't follow me. I want to be clear about something. I did not think this was insane because it turned out to be real. I had the proof. My grandmother's letters. The pull in my chest. The way I'd felt the moment I arrived in Crestfall, like something in me had recognized the place. What I thought was insane was the idea of staying, of blowing up the entire structure of my life for a man I'd known for 6 days and a bond I hadn't chosen. I wanted it. That was the problem. The pull wasn't just physical. It was like being homesick for a place you'd never been. Every time I was near him, the tight, anxious noise in the back of my head went quiet. I slept better the closer I was to the compound. I ate better. I felt more like myself, which was disorienting because I didn't know this version of myself. That scared me more than anything else. Because wanting something that much, that fast, with that little control, that was exactly how you ended up wrecked. So on day 10 of being in Crestfall, I made a plan. I would sell the cabin, go back to Denver, let the bond fade, whatever uncomfortable meant, and chalk this up to a strange chapter and move on. I started packing. She showed up on day 11. She knocked at 7 in the morning when I was halfway through boxing up the kitchen. She looked at the boxes and then at me, and something complicated moved across her face. He doesn't know you're leaving, she said. I know. He wouldn't stop you. I know that too. She sat down at my kitchen table uninvited again. Can I tell you something, Maya? Not as anyone official, just as someone who's been in this pack for 20 years. Sure. Lost his first mate when he was 23, she said. She died in a territorial dispute before the bond was completed. He's been running this pack alone for 11 years. He's a good alpha. Steady, fair, strong. But there's a weight on him. There has been for a long time. I stopped wrapping mugs. I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty, she said quickly. You don't owe him anything. The bond doesn't create a debt. But I want you to understand what it means in our world when someone is fated. It doesn't happen to everyone. It doesn't happen often. And walking away from it, she stopped. The bond fades for both of you. It costs both of you. That seems like his problem, I said. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. It is, she agreed. I'm just saying. You asked me what you'd be walking away from. That's the answer. She left me with the half-packed boxes and a headache forming behind my eyes. I didn't finish packing that day. What I did instead was go to the compound, not to tell him I was staying. Just, I needed to see him one more time, in daylight, with the pull right there, and decide with my whole chest whether I was actually capable of walking away from it. I found him at the edge of the property, at a fence line that backed up against the trees. He was alone, looking at the tree line with his arms crossed. He heard me coming while I was still 50 feet away. He turned. There it was, the pull, a live wire, the moment our eyes met. Leaving, I said. I stopped 10 feet away. I wanted to tell you in person. He held very still. Okay. I need you to know it's not about you, specifically. It's about. I can't make this size of a decision in 10 days. I can't give up my whole life because my body is doing something I don't understand. I know, he said. And the bond will fade. Yes. For both of us. Something moved across his face. Yes. I stood there. He didn't argue, didn't move toward me, didn't do anything but look at me with those gray eyes and give me the decision that was already mine. And I thought, this is the problem. He was so careful, so controlled. He'd kept his distance all week, kept himself on the other side of every room, never pushed. A less disciplined man might have made it easier to leave. Is there anything you want to say? I asked, to try to convince me. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you smell like home. That was it. That was all he said. I drove back to the cabin and finished packing. I left at 2 in the morning. I don't know why 2 in the morning specifically. Some instinct that said to leave in the dark, to not give myself daylight to second-guess the road signs. I loaded the car, locked up the cabin, put the key in an envelope I'd already addressed to the realtor. I drove the winding road out of Crestfall and told myself that the tightening in my chest was just the altitude, just the bond, just a thing that would fade in months, manageable and temporary, and on the other side of it would be my regular life. 3 miles down the mountain, I stopped at a red light in a town called Miller's Gap. The passenger door opened. Caius got in. I have never screamed out loud in my adult life. I screamed. How? I gripped the wheel. How are you here? I left an hour ago. 30 minutes, he said. I run faster than this car on these roads. He had run 40 miles on mountain roads in 40 minutes. That's not possible, I said. Maya, his voice was very steady. You have my car. I looked at the key in the ignition. It was not my car key. In the dark, in my hurry, I had grabbed his keys off my own kitchen counter, where he must have set them down one of the times he'd come by. I'd been driving his truck the whole time. I didn't steal your car, I said. My voice came out very small. I know you didn't. I thought it was mine. I know. We sat at the red light. It had cycled through twice. No other cars on the road at 2:40 in the morning in Miller's Gap. His hand moved and closed around my wrist. Not tight, just present, and the bond snapped alive. Not the pull, not the homesick ache, something bigger, like every single sense I had suddenly sharpened and oriented, and the noise I'd been carrying for 10 days went completely, absolutely silent. I started crying. I wasn't expecting that. My face did it without consulting me. Caius didn't say anything. He just kept his hand around my wrist, and I sat at the red light in a truck that wasn't mine, and cried in a way I hadn't cried since I was small, and my parents were newly gone, and I didn't understand why. I don't know how to want something this much, I said. I was not looking at him. I've never. It's too fast. Everything about this is too fast, and I can't tell if what I feel is real or if it's just the bond, and none of it actually means anything. I know, he said. That's not an answer. No, he said, it's not. His thumb moved against the inside of my wrist. I can't tell you the bond isn't part of it. It is. But the bond is not the same as the choice. The bond is why you're here. The choice is what you do about it. What if I make the wrong one? Then you made the wrong one, he said. And you live with it, same as anyone. The light was red again. What do you want? I asked. Not what the bond wants. What do you want? He was quiet for long enough that I finally looked at him. He was looking at me like I was something he'd been waiting for without knowing what form it would take. I want you to drive back, he said. I want to spend the next 6 months in the same town as you, going slow, letting you learn the pack and letting the pack learn you. I want to court you in a way that gives you real information about who I am. And then I want you to choose. And if I choose to leave after 6 months, then I let you go, he said, and I carry it. That's my problem. The light turned green. I sat at the green light for 10 seconds. Then I did a U-turn. He said nothing, but I felt, from the hand still circling my wrist, the very careful exhale. I drove us back to Crestfall. The 6 months started the next morning. This was better than his word. He did not assume the decision. He did not treat my return as a conclusion. He introduced me to the pack slowly, in small groups, never forcing me into the center of anything. He showed me what running a pack actually looked like. The disputes mediated, the territory maintained, the rhythms of a community that had its own governance and its own laws. He let me see the hard parts too. I kept working remotely from the cabin. My design clients didn't need to know I was in a mountain town in Colorado. The cabin was better than I'd expected, once I'd actually unpacked in it for real. I fixed the porch step that had been listing. I bought better coffee than the Bend carried. Caius came by on Tuesdays and Thursdays for dinner. My idea, my schedule, I'd made that clear. The first Tuesday, I made pasta from scratch because I was nervous and cooking gives your hands something to do. He ate 2 full servings and didn't comment on the nerves. We talked about my grandmother for 2 hours. He'd known her his whole life. She'd been what the pack called a keeper, a former member who lived on the edges of the community, a bridge to the human world. She'd fed information into Crestfall for 30 years. She'd been loved. I learned things about her in those conversations that the letters hadn't told me. The second Thursday, I asked him about his first mate. He went still for a moment, not guarded, just careful, and then told me. Her name was Sarah. They'd known from 17 that the bond existed. She died at 22 during a territorial incursion from a neighboring pack that had since been disbanded. He'd killed the alpha responsible. He said it without drama. He said it the way people say the things they've come to terms with. I asked him how long it took. 6 years, he said, more or less. I asked him if he was afraid of it happening again. He looked at me across my kitchen table, every day. That was the moment I understood something about him. The way he'd held himself back from me from the beginning, the careful distance. He wanted this as badly as the bond said he did, and it terrified him, and he was doing it anyway. That kind of courage looked like stillness from the outside, almost mistaken it for indifference. Week 5, Delia brought me into a pack training session, not the combat kind, a night run, which was exactly what it sounded like. I couldn't shift, but the half-blood inheritance meant I was faster than a human, and in the dark on familiar terrain, something animal and sure took over my feet. I ran alongside people who could become wolves, and felt for the first time like I fit the shape of a life. I had my first real fight with Caius. There was a family in the pack, a mated pair with 3 kids, who had a dispute with a neighboring family over territory lines. Old roots and a lot of hurt feelings. Caius made a ruling I thought was wrong. I told him so at dinner. He explained his reasoning. I still thought he was wrong. I said so again, specifically with details. He listened to the whole thing. He pushed back. We argued for an hour and a half, genuinely, and the pasta went cold. He didn't change his ruling. But 3 days later, he told me he'd found a middle path, described it, and said he wouldn't have seen it without the argument. I thought, okay, there it is. There's the real information. Month 3, I found the twist. I found it in a box at the back of my grandmother's closet that I hadn't opened yet because it was heavy, and I kept putting it off. Inside was a second set of letters, not to Ethan. To my grandmother's pack Alpha, the Ashwood Alpha, dated over 30 years. And in the earliest ones, Grandma Ruth described the blood price in more detail than she had in her own letters. The blood price hadn't been about an Ashwood pack debt. It had been about me, specifically, about what I was. My grandmother had carried a dormant genetic line from a lineage the pack books called a tether, a rare inheritance that only manifested in a fated mate pairing. A tether was exactly what it sounded like. In a mating bond, a tether didn't just complete the bond, they anchored it. Their mate's pack bond strengthened through them, becoming more stable, more connected, more resilient against outside interference. The Ashwood Alpha hadn't wanted Grandma Ruth's daughter returned to the pack out of obligation. He wanted to control the Tether bloodline. And the blood price. The arrangement Ruth had made. It had been the price of his silence about what she was, because if the wrong packs found out a Tether existed, they would come for that person. Not to mate with them. To use them. Grandma Ruth had known this. She'd hidden my mother. When my mother died and I survived, she'd kept me hidden too. She'd waited until the Ashwood Alpha died, and his successors fell apart, and the pack that might have come for me was gone. And then she'd sent me to Crestfall. To Caius. Not just because the bond would find me, but because she'd trusted him to keep me safe. I drove to the compound with the letters in my lap. I found Caius in his office. I put the letters on his desk. He read them slowly. I watched his face. When he finished, he looked up. "You knew," I said. "It wasn't an accusation yet. I was still deciding." "I knew the bloodline," he said. "Your grandmother told me when you were a child. She told me you might come here someday and that you would need to be protected. She didn't tell me about the Tether specifically until 4 months before she died." "Was that why you held back?" I said. "Because of what I am? Because you wanted the bond's benefits?" He was quiet for a moment. He stood up. "I held back because it was your choice," he said. "Not because of the Tether, because of you." He held my gaze. "Maya, I have led this pack for 11 years. I have defended this territory, managed this community, carried the weight of these bonds every single day. My pack is not fragile. I don't need a Tether to do my job." "Then why did my grandmother send me here?" "Because she knew the bond existed," he said. "She felt it the first time she held you. She waited until you were safe, and then she arranged for you to find it." He paused. "She loved you. She wanted you to have what she gave up." The pull in my chest, always present, sharpened, like it was underscoring the sentence. "She gave up her pack to be with a human," I said, "and she sent me to the pack anyway." "She gave up the pack because her alpha would have used her child," he said. "That's different. She thought you deserved the choice she never had. The full life. All of it." I stood there with the letters between us. "I'm not afraid of being a Tether," I said slowly. "I'm afraid that you want this partly because of it." "Test it," he said. "Take another month. 2. Watch me. See if I treat you differently now that it's named." He stepped around the desk and stopped 2 feet from me, close enough that the bond hummed. "I'll tell you what I'm afraid of, since we're being honest. I'm afraid you'll find out everything about who I am and what this life costs and you'll leave. That's what keeps me careful. Not the Tether. You." I looked at him for a long time. "Okay," I said. "Another month." Month 4 I watched. He didn't treat me differently. That's the thing. He was the same. Tuesday and Thursday dinners, the same careful distance in public, the same patient handling of every question I brought him. The pack treated me the same. Delia, who I now knew had been Ruth's closest friend in Crestfall, didn't start looking at me with new calculation. If anything, Caius held back more after the letters, more careful, more scrupulous about giving me space. It was that finally that got me. Not the bond, not the pull, not the Tether revelation or the history or the grandmother who'd loved me in a secret and complicated way. It was the fact that the more he knew about my value to him, the further back he stood. That was the real information. That was the thing I'd been waiting to learn. Month 4, week 3, a Tuesday. I made the pasta again. From scratch, same as the first time. He arrived at 7 and took off his boots at the door and washed his hands at the sink without being asked, because by now he knew that was the move. We ate, we talked. He didn't know anything was different. After dinner, I put my hand on the kitchen table, palm up. He looked at it. "Staying," I said. He went still. "Not because of the bond," I said. "I mean, also because of the bond. But because I've spent 4 months watching you choose me carefully every single time, and I want to be chosen carefully. I want to be in a pack. I want to know what I am and live inside it. I paused. And I want to know you. He put his hand over mine. The bond completed in the same way a door opens. A click, and then the world on the other side. Everything sharpened and then settled. The noise in the back of my head, the noise I'd been carrying so long I'd stopped noticing it. It stopped. I sat in the quiet. "Hi," I said. "Hi," he said. He was smiling. It was not a large smile. But it was the first one I'd seen on him that reached his eyes, and it looked like it had been stored up for a long time. We stayed at the kitchen table until midnight, just talking. That was what surprised me most. Nothing dramatic happened. No fireworks. Just the room quieter, and the bond steady and him across from me, finally without the careful wall, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me about growing up in Crestfall, about learning to run at 9, to shift at 12, to lead at 21 when his father stepped down. About the years of figuring out how to be an alpha that people could trust, not just fear. About Sarah and what it had cost him and what he'd built in the years since. I told him about Denver, about the aunt who raised me well but never felt like home, about graphic design, which I loved genuinely and not just as a job, about the coffee maker that sputtered, about reading 47 letters in a cabin I'd inherited from a grandmother I'd never known well enough, and feeling the ground go out from under me. "She did right by you," he said, "Ruth, in the end." "She did," I said. "I'm still a little mad at her for the timeline." "She waited until the danger was gone." "She could have written to me," I said, "could have explained." "Would you have believed her?" I thought about it honestly. 27-year-old Maya in Denver. "No," I said, "probably not." "She knew you," he said. "She knew you'd need to feel it." I would need to feel it. That was exactly true. We said goodnight at the door. He touched my face once, briefly, and then stepped back. "Thursday," I said. "Thursday," he agreed. He walked back to the compound through the dark. I stood on the porch and watched him go, and the bond followed him like a thread, steady and warm and entirely mine. Over the next weeks, the pack adjusted to us naturally, like something clicking into place. They'd known about the fated bond before I had, most of them. They'd been watching carefully. Delia told me later that half the pack had held their breath while I was deciding. That the ripple of the bond completing had gone through everyone like a cord resolving. The tether thing, as I started calling it, I learned more about it as the bond settled. It was subtle. Nothing dramatic. Caius's pack bonds did run stronger. The community had a cohesion it hadn't quite had before. People said they felt more grounded. I felt it too. A sense of being woven into something, of being necessary in a way that had nothing to do with work output or task completion. I moved into the compound in month 6, gradually. I kept the cabin, kept my space, kept the porch I'd fixed. But the compound was home. Caius was home, and that still surprised me. The simplicity of it. I called my aunt in Denver on a Tuesday morning and told her a carefully edited version of everything. Human community, mountain living. A man I was serious about. She cried a little, the good kind, and said she'd be glad to visit. I didn't tell her about the shifting. That could wait. I am narrating this from the porch of the cabin on a Sunday in early spring. The trees are doing that first green thing, the tentative bud green that looks like the mountain is making up its mind. This is somewhere in the territory, running because Sunday morning is his and he uses it the way some people use church. The bond tracks him at the edge of my awareness, steady, present. I think about the version of me who took his keys by accident and made it 40 miles before he ran me down. I think about her a lot, actually. She was not wrong, that version. She was protecting herself the best way she knew how, from something that wanted too much, too fast. I understand her. But she was wrong about one thing. She thought wanting something that much was the danger. Not. The danger is not being able to tell the difference between wanting because you've been pushed into a corner and wanting because you've chosen, eyes open, with full information, in your own time. The bond brought me here. Caius let me decide what to do about it. That's the thing I want you to understand, if you're listening. The bond is not the love. The bond is the door. What you do with the open door, how long you stand in it, whether you walk through or turn back, that's yours. Nobody can take that from you. Not a pack, not an alpha, not even a fated pull that lives in your chest like a second heartbeat. I walked through. The morning is cold the way mountain mornings are cold even in spring, and the coffee is good, and the bond hums warm and steady. I walked through and I'm staying.